Welcome back, everyone. We are moving along through our career fair, and we are super excited to have Leilani Roth, um, first responder, and she's going to share her background in tactical medicine. And so we're just going to hand the baton off to you to keep things rolling. And so, welcome, Leilani. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. There's a lot of information that I will go over. I'll try to keep it very simple and brief. But this presentation is about emergency medical technician, kind of focus on what an EMT is and the different roles that you can do. We do have technical background that goes in. I'm going to go over my background a little bit with you guys, go into what an EMT is, what that role is, and how to become one, and what we actually do. So imagine a day where every decision you make can save a life. And welcome to a world of first responder. It's always adaptive. It's always exciting. There's always a change in our jobs because every day is never the same. And that's what makes this job so much fun and also eye-opening with how life is. So as we go through this presentation, I would like for you guys to consider one, if you have any questions, to write those down. I don't know if you have a chat room or not. I have some information that, maybe that could be relayed. But my recommendation is do a lot of research. If you find anything that you're interested in, that is what the World Wide Web is amazing for, is for you to research and learn about jobs. And you can also reach out to local agencies. A lot of fire departments and law enforcement agencies, as well as ambulance companies, are always happy to take the time to speak with you and answer any questions that you have. So if you find a location you're interested in, I highly recommend that you connect with them and ask them the questions that you have. There might be some agencies based on how old you are. Most of them you need to be 18 years old. But we do have some high school students that come through and they're able to do ride-alongs. The fire departments also offer some ride-alongs, and in some counties there's volunteers where you can volunteer as a firefighter and learn more about being a first responder. Law enforcement has different programs for volunteer services for high school students who are interested in law enforcement. So it is important that you reach out to agencies that could give you a lot of information, and there might be a way that you guys could get involved right now before you graduate high school and really understand this is something you want to do. So my name is Leilani Roth. I have been in first responder for about 17 years. This is about 18 years that I'm going into. I have worked on an ambulance for about 10 years, and then I transitioned to other roles. I was a field training officer. I did community outreach. I did continuing education, and the continued education was for all first responders. I do have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and I emphasize in forensic psychology. I'm actually currently a doctoral student that's focusing on clinical psychology as well. Why am I bringing that into this? It's because my role as a first responder has shared and exposed me to a lot of different elements that show how important mental health is for all ages and in any role you go into. So if you do want to go in as a first responder, it's really important for you to understand the mental behaviors that go behind that because of what you're exposed to. And it's something that could influence maybe what you're going through now in life and how that can correlate as to being a first responder. I wanted to go in, wanted to help first responders. I work in different roles that allow me to change policies and influence mental health with first responders. I am also currently active in the field for like the last 7 years. I've been doing tactical medicine. And that's the more exciting. That part is like where everyone gets excited, like, oh, you're doing tactical medicine. And I do. It's a lot of fun. We do a lot of training. But I want to say and always stress, it's very different than what you watch on TV. Okay, so let's like differentiate that. TV has a lot of extra things that go on in real life. It's a little bit different than that. But I do love my job. I do work with a government agency. So knowing with an EMT, that is a very basic foundational certification that you can obtain within 3 months. And so you can obtain so much knowledge that it establishes a foundation for you to grow. And it doesn't take too much of your time. So if you decide, hey, you know what, I don't want to do this job, it's knowledge you'll never not need. You might have family members might need to, have some kind of medical background. Maybe you're someone that's on the road a lot and you ride ATVs or quads with your family, or you spend time camping with your family. You never know when something's going to come up, and it's always great to have more knowledge, especially when you can help people. And so as a first responder, that's what you do. What I also do is I'm also department chair for a fire technology program and an EMT program for a community college. I've been teaching for over 7 years in different capacities. At this point, I do run an EMT program, so I have lots of information to share with you when it comes to certifications. So things to think about, and I know we're focused on EMT, and so let me go in a little bit as far as EMT. And I'll tell you what that is. But what the EMT is a great foundation, which I said earlier, and law enforcement, firefighter, or an ambulance all look at those certifications. So it doesn't just go, if you want to be an EMT, you only have to work on ambulance. No, actually, you can work as an ER tech. You can work in an emergency room. There's different things that you can do with that. But just having the basic knowledge of what an EMT can offer. But if you are interested in going to the fire academy, an EMT certification is actually required to become a firefighter. So this is again another foundation. If you want to go into law enforcement, an EMT certification is normally an additional bonus of a certification for most agencies. So as you can see, your EMT certification can really travel with you. Even if this is something you want to take at 17 and a half, so there are some age requirements with certifications, but you need to be 18 by the time you get your EMT certification. But it doesn't stop you from going through the program if you're interested for non-credit EMT programs, which they do offer. And we'll go over the different levels of what the EMTs are and certifications. Things to think about as we go through this presentation. I want you to keep in mind, like, what are the qualities you have that could make a difference in emergencies? And this is something you could think about for yourself. Do you have the ability to be calm under pressure? I mean, the ability to stay composed and make rational decisions, even when there's chaos. And it's funny to think that some people actually think better when there's chaos because it's something simple and easy to fix. Are you quick thinking? It's being able to assess the situation rapidly and take those appropriate actions when the time comes. Effective communication, you want to be able to be clear and concise in how you communicate and convey that information, again, when there's chaos. You want to know if you have empathy and compassion, because certain situations, you want to be able to understand, relate to those emotions that are affecting people. There's also like one really big thing, which is adaptability. You want to be able to be flexible and able to adjust to changes and circumstances. We always say we plan for the worst and we hope for the best. It's because we train for the worst case scenario. When we get there and we realize, oh, it's not that bad, it makes the call and process much easier. There's leadership, taking charge when necessary. There's technical skills. You learn and you obtain a lot of certifications in the EMT programs. You can earn up to 8 different certifications during that EMT program that can carry over into the fire, law enforcement, and on the ambulance, including obtaining your BLS, your basic life support, CPR certification, which is something that is required for the EMT program. Let's not just get stuck on knowledge and reading and the hands-on fun training, but you also have to have the ability to have the physical stamina, because in this job, endurance is very much needed. When you're responding to calls, you're not on flat surfaces all the time. Maybe think about being on a highway on ice plant and moving patients that way. So it's learning how to maneuver through different environments. And if it's raining or if it's hot, those are different things that you go through. It's a physically demanding situation. Are you resourceful? And do you like working as a team? First responders very much work as teams. And it maximizes the effectiveness when you respond to these calls. So what is an EMT? What have I been talking about? Well, an EMT is an emergency medical technician, and there's different certifications. I don't have it on here, but an EMR, emergency medical responder, is your most basic level certification. A lot of people that are about 16 years old to about 17 take this certification, especially if they're lifeguards. They're working on like out on the ocean, junior lifeguards. It's great foundation of first responder. The next certification is your EMTB, which is your emergency medical technician basic. That as it falls under different short-term training programs. That's the one I was mentioning that runs about 3 months, 16 weeks based on the program. They have accelerated programs, but I would say caution with accelerated programs because you have to have really solid study habits. It is a lot of information to learn in a short time frame. I like to compare an EMT program as being required to learn a new language fluently within 16 weeks. And so what type of time do you need to put into that? There's practical skills that are required for this, but the certification for an EMTB basic is what will allow you to work on an ambulance, either on an ALS, which is a 911 system, or a BLS, which is working on an ambulance, not responding to 911 calls. However, you are running from hospital to hospital and you're transporting stable patients back and forth to different locations. And that's considered non-emergency, but an EMT-based certification is what's required. And again, that is required to get hired on as a firefighter. You don't need it for the fire academy, but is recommended to take before or after the fire academy. And then you have, it's actually called an advanced EMT, an EMTI, and that's your intermediate. State of California doesn't recognize that. However, it is a national certification that follows the levels of certifications under EMT. And then the last one is EMTP, which is your emergency medical technician paramedic. And what changes and what the differences are between the two are scope of practice. An EMT is able to administer a lot of life-saving preventions and interventions and patient movement, while a paramedic can give more medications and can also look at, let's say, EKG rhythms, like seeing your heart and reading those. And so it's a little bit in the scope of practice, longer time frame. Typically, those hours run about 12 to 1,800 hours of training. Why is being an EMT fun? Well, it's exciting. Your days are never the same. Gives people a sense of purpose, and you have the ability to help others. There's quite a bit of adrenaline and challenges that go in this. Community connection is really important, professional growth, and I want to include personal growth that goes in this because of the types of calls that you respond to. Teamwork and camaraderie, and there's stability and job security as far as being an EMT. The different types of calls that EMTs can run, there's different types. So like I mentioned, there's interfacility. So that's where you're moving patients from hospital to hospital or bringing people from hospital home. There's long distance transports. I think this part was kind of the fun part when I used to work on the ambulance, is sometimes I would work, get on shift and they would go, hey, guess where you're going? You're driving to Napa. And there's my whole shift. Picking up a patient, I'm driving to Napa Valley. So you are not just in the one city that you work in, you're actually all over a regional area and do quite a bit of driving. There's medical calls. So let's say maybe someone passed out or they're not feeling well. Those are calls that you would be running on. I don't have it on here, but I meant to put trauma. So those are your motor vehicle accidents that can occur that you respond to, your 911 calls. Code 2 and code 3 is a difference between an emergency call and a non-emergency call that varies per county. And then we have behavioral health patients. So as you can see, there's a wide scope of types of calls that you can respond on, which is why it can be really fun with this line of work. It's because it's never the same. It's always changing and it's always challenging you. And sometimes you may have seen some ambulance sitting down in parking lots. They're called staging locations, and that means they're just kind of sitting there waiting for a 911 call or a call to come in. And they're placed there by dispatchers. The county decides, hey, this is the best place for an ambulance to stay and can cover this side of the city if a 911 call comes in. So there's a lot of strategic planning. They're not just sitting there. They're waiting for a call or waiting to move to a different area. I think I went over this just a little bit, but something to keep in mind is picture yourself responding to these kind of emergencies. And what emotions and thoughts do you think you would have responding to something like this? Again, having some type of first responder training is important because if you are the first person that's on this, whether it's someone you're involved or someone you know or something you see, it's always important to feel like you know what to do instead of feeling helpless. And a lot of students that come into our program have been faced with something that you see on the screen and they didn't like feeling like they didn't know what to do. So they wanted to take a class to get that knowledge. So in case it ever happened again, they didn't have that feeling. There are different types of jobs. Different types of shifts. Some shifts can run 12 hours long. Some of them can run 24, 27, or 72 hours. It's based on the county that people live in. Well, not they live in, but the city that they work in and the type of call volumes. However, there are some locations that have stations that you can go into and kind of hang out in until you have a call that comes in. There's sometimes where you're kind of just sitting in that parking lot and waiting for the entire shift. And that ambulance becomes your office for the day. And so you become very close with your partner. And that partner kind of establishes that camaraderie of someone that you can share with and support each other with on shift and off shift. Different skills and qualities. So if you reflect on your own skills and qualities, which ones do you think are your strongest? How can they be applied in a first responder role if this is something you're thinking about? So critical thinking, problem solving, stress management, adaptability, leadership, communication, empathy, and resiliency. This is something that we talked about earlier, but now putting you in a different thought process of, well, how would I be in this job? Do I have these qualities? I'd like to have some of these qualities. Are these things you can learn? Yeah, absolutely. These are things that you can learn. And it's through time and exposure. So how to become an EMT? Research, lots of research. Start by researching the different types of first responder roles, like firefighters, like emergency management, emergency medical services, law enforcement, there's search and rescue. There's a lot of different ways to get educated and learn about being a first responder and what that entails. And again, some of the search responder, some of the ways to do search and rescue are through sheriff's departments, and sheriff's departments are a great way to volunteer for that as well. So I hope you see there's a lot of opportunity to volunteer and really see if this is something you want to learn about and get involved with, especially if you want to be involved in the community. But it's learning what those training requirements look like. Look at job outlooks. Even if you want to go online and say EMT jobs and you pull up the EMT job and look at those requirements, that's a great way to figure out, I want to be here. How do I get there? And research is going to do that and do a lot of that. Like I mentioned before, don't hesitate reaching out to those agencies. Someone is always happy to talk with you. You might even be able to take a look inside of the police cars or fire engines or on the ambulance and really get you intrigued and ask more questions about this field. There are basic requirements for first responders, such as age, having a high school diploma is important, and really having a clean criminal background. They all look at that in this line of work. It's really important because you're going into people's homes when they're most vulnerable, and they want to make sure that you are able to go in the house and take care of them. So these are things to keep in mind. There's different eligibility criteria. And the best steps, again, is to reach out to those agencies and ask them what the requirements are. If you're interested about becoming an EMT, you can go to a website called EMSA, and it's EMSA. And what it does, it tells you everything about being an EMT. And it even helps you locate different agencies that you can reach out to in school programs. There's different trainings that's going to be required, such as the EMT certification. That's a formalized EMS training program. Police officers go through an academy, firefighters go through an academy. So the theme here is that there's more education outside of high school, but the outcome is going to be fantastic for you and longevity is there, along with job security. Once you get your licensure and certifications, again, that agency will talk you through each step, but always ask questions and do a lot of research. Some stories from the field are just kind of things to put here, like what someone can respond to as a first responder. And maybe what would you have done in these situations? How do you think this experience would change you? So, a frantic call received from a panicked husband reporting that his wife was in labor and the baby was arriving quickly while they were stranded on the side of the highway. That actually happened on Highway 5, not too far from the Los Banos area, and a local CAL FIRE team had to respond to that right around Christmas time. So it's the last thing that they expected, but there's a transition. They were like, okay, we have to do this. Another is a call about a car accident on the highway. Upon arrival, a crew found a vehicle went off the roadway with a young woman trapped inside, and significant injuries occurred to this patient. This is something I responded to actually off duty. So I'm bringing that up. This was off duty on Pacheco Pass when it was raining, and it was in a place that there was no cell coverage. So there's ways to kind of think about, you're not always on ambulance when you come across something. You're just driving along and you're just that person that sees something. And the third one is like, what if a patient collapsed due to chest pain and became unconscious and unresponsive? This actually happened at the airport when I was trying to fly out on vacation. So again, things happen. And when they do, for me, learning when I first went into this is I just always want to have knowledge to help people. And if you have that ability and you have that thought, like I want to help people, this is a great way to do that in a short time frame. And it's knowledge you'll never not need in life. It'll always come in handy. So my final reflection thought for you, or just points to think about, is reflect on what being an EMT means to you now, after learning a little bit more information or learning a little bit more information about being a first responder. Do you see yourself in this role? And what steps can you take today to start this journey, which is going back right off to research? Tactical medicine, although it's really important, it's very exciting, you have to start at the very basic level of getting the EMT certification and getting knowledge and gaining experience, and then doors will open for you. Walk through those doors and see what lies ahead. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Leilani. That was amazing. I learned so much. And so we're going to go ahead and open it up for some questions. We do have a question.
Yes.
And the first question is, what is it like to be a female in a predominantly male profession? And then the
That is
follow-up,
great question.
the follow-up is, what advice would you give to girls who want to go into this career?
To be straightforward, it is very challenging. I am in a very male-dominated job on an ambulance. And when I first started, I was a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, and I was going into this field of industry. And 3 months on my job, I was challenged by a male firefighter because I could not find a blood pressure cuff. And I felt very small, so to speak, because I was a stay-at-home mom, I was a stay-at-home wife, I was just exposed to this. And he made a comment that basically said, this is why women should stay at home. And I will never forget that comment. Lo and behold, we're actually great friends now, 17 years later. We're really good friends. But it was in that moment I had a decision to make. And I decided that I was not going to let anyone dictate what I could and could not do. And I was sure I knew where that blood pressure cuff was next time. It challenged me to make sure, next time. And so that next call, I couldn't wait to see him. And before that call, I pulled out the blood pressure cuff and I got it. And he came up to me and gave me a high five. He goes, good. And like I said, we're best friends right now. And I told his wife on him. But after that part, I would say on a serious note, it is very challenging. As a female in this line of work, you have to hold yourself higher. You have a lot more pressure on you. I always need to make sure, well, now I'm working a tactical field. And so even more guys that I'm working with, is I always need to make sure I challenge myself to make sure they don't feel like they need to look after me. And even though they feel like they do because I'm a female and that's how they're raised and they're gentlemen, they also know that I have their back, that I could carry my own equipment, that I could do the same things that they can do, and I have a mouth just like they do. And I have no problem using that voice if needed. And so females going into this need to hold that leadership role and understand it is challenging. They will be challenged, but as soon as they hold themselves and own that they need to be there, you earn a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect from the guys I work with. Most of these guys even tell me like they trust me over some of their male friends because they know that I will own it. I will be there for them. And so that's what I would say as a female. Be prepared. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And at the end, you have this second family that would drop everything to be there for you. It is worth it.
Love it. Don't
Yeah.
be afraid to
No,
go hit the challenges head on. I love that.
you
A
have
second
to.
a second question is,
Uh-huh.
how do you keep calm in these emergency situations?
Um, I always learn to take a deep breath. And one thing I didn't state is that my dad was a police officer. So it's something like I kind of learned from him. And I don't know, I think something I've learned over the years is this is a job for some people and it's not for everyone. And some people have cycled through that I have ride-alongs, and at the end of the day, they're like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I respect what you do. I'll always use the knowledge, but I can't do this. For me, I'm someone that just thrives in chaos. For me, it's very straightforward. I enjoy being able to help and being part of a team that communicates effectively, and at the outcome, everyone going home safe. And I will do whatever I can to make that happen. But I've learned to take deep breaths because one, it's free. I can do it anytime I need to. And it's something I could do on and off. And I think that's just like really important when it comes down to things.
Love it. What trends do you see in your field, in the EMT field? Are there any trends that you're seeing?
I see a lot of trends. And to go into some of it's healthy, some of it's not. That's the reality of this line of work. I've always been fully transparent. Sometimes or like some people tell me like that was a little too transparent. I'm like, well, now you know. The facts are there. I have learned and seen over the years that being an EMT on an ambulance is a stepping stone. And the stepping stone is more so this is not longevity. It can be. Don't get me wrong for those that are out there for longevity wise. It is very hard on the body. It's hard on the sleep schedule. It's hard on eating. It's hard on family. Um, I earned my bachelor's degree working night shifts and hooking up to the Staples Wi-Fi to do my homework. But if you're dedicated and committed, you can move into different directions and make pretty good money doing that and learning, not just learning and applying your skills, but the substantial knowledge of life in general that you can't learn from a textbook. It's experience and exposure. But I think with that, people use as a stepping stone. They go to respiratory therapy, they go to PA program. I want to say the most common one is probably the nursing program. Like that's probably the most common that you'll see. They'll do about 2 years as an EMT, and then they'll move right into a nursing program. There are paramedic programs. Some people do the paramedic, and that adds a little bit longer longevity there, and then they transfer there onto fire. So that's kind of like that direction. And oddly, dental hygienist over the last 5 years has been an increase from those that are EMTs becoming dental hygienists. And I thought it was the craziest thing, but here we are, and there's the numbers.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
wouldn't have thought of that.
neither have I.
And I love how and this is something our program really stresses to students is be strategic. Like
Yes.
sometimes they're like, well, I don't want to do this forever. And it's like, use it as a stepping stone. Like, I
Yes.
love how you talked about, how your journey into now learning about how mental health is connected. You shared that earlier on in your
Yeah.
presentation, which kind of segues to our next question is
Yes.
around mental health. Have you seen a rise in mental health
Yeah.
emergency calls?
It has been very challenging for that personally, and I guess again, full transparency is I'm on like the law enforcement side, on the government side now. And there's a transition, and this is kind of both with like ambulance and law enforcement. I want to go into, I work with a lot of military as well. So there's a little bit more that goes to this. But over the last 4 years, I personally lost 10 very good friends to suicide. And I know a lot of people, so I don't want this to be like it's a small pool. It's not. I know people from all over the US. And that was kind of like one of my driving factors when I first went into psychology was like, how can I help? Because when I first started on an EMT, on an ambulance, like I said, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was exposed to different things that was quite shocking to me, even though my dad was a police officer. And I was told to shake it off. I was told many times on different calls I had that were really, really tough calls. And they're like, this is part of the job. This is what you signed up for. And I had realized actually how much mental health damage that created. And it was like just ongoing. And it went on for quite a few years. And I've been married 24 years. And I'm bringing that up because my husband noticed a lot. And my son is 23, and he knew me as a stay-at-home mom, then now as a first responder. And some of those comments he said before were quite humbling to me, which was like, I wonder what you would be like if you weren't in that line of work. And so it was very challenging early on because the mindset in agencies was like, this is what you signed up for, this is what you're doing. And I put myself strategically, as the word you said, into positions where I can make change. And eventually I started changing policies and procedures. And we ended up doing that locally. Then we went, countywide, then we went statewide. Um, and now a lot of agencies are actually starting to embrace first responders are experiencing mental health issues and quite significantly. And then, of course, there was quite a significant rate increase when COVID hit. And COVID changed the whole dynamic of not just mental health, but first responder mental health as well. And I believe agencies were like, we need to take this seriously. And they're now starting to implement programs. So again, we're going back to the word is strategic, and I'm always like goal planning. I want to do this. So what do I need to do what do I need to do to get from here to there? And I've climbed that ladder in any direction I can make it. But yeah, there's been a significant amount. And it really does come down to agencies being open enough and people being open enough to share like this call was not okay. This call did affect me. I am bothered by this. Let's just validate it, and now we can move on to the next steps. So,
Thank you for sharing. So,
welcome.
another follow-up question. So, what do you or you do for self-care? Maybe some of your colleagues would love to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I lecture a lot on the topic. So like I do a lot better with these Q&As. I do a lot better with this. I'm very outspoken in a lot of agencies. They see me coming like, oh, here we go again. And the biggest thing for my self-care, which I've learned, one, working more hours doesn't help. I that was like something you don't do. I was working maybe over 120-hour work weeks on top of going to school. And I realized that was not the healthiest thing. And oddly enough, going into clinical psychology while I was doing my master's degree, so it's like 7 years ago now, I learned ways to cope through my education. And it wasn't through the agency, it was honestly through like, does this work? No. Does this work? No, is trial and error. And then actually being open enough to talk to a therapist and open enough to go, you know what? I don't need to talk to this therapist. I could talk to this therapist and see if we get along. And I could use my voice to go, hey, I'm going to interview you as well. And let's see if we work. Um, And then I got into powerlifting. So I actually powerlift. I'm at the gym quite a bit, about 6 days a week, and doing that. And it's not just only for endurance and being physically capable. A lot of guys on my team are 6'5". I'm 5'8". I could drag them around a room with all their gear on, and like I'm very proud of that. So, but it's personal and mental challenge. So anything physical, the gym, running, being outside, sometimes just hanging on to my dogs, and my dog's looking at me trying to escape, is like where I'm like, okay, I'm squeezing them a little too hard. But it's being self-aware and acknowledging, like, I'm tired. I'm okay to be tired. I'm very angry or upset right now. That's okay. I can be okay and upset right now. And validating it. So that's really what I've been focusing on, especially the last maybe 3 years.
Okay. And then what is the best part of your job?
I love meeting people. I have met the most incredible people in my line of work. On the ambulance, I've, met with World War II veterans. I've worked with actors. I've worked with incredible people that, like, I met the person who put up all the signs on the highways, that have the phones. I met him. So it was really neat to hear about his stories, but it's listening to people. It's listening and listening about different walks of lives, what they've gone through, how they've overcome, how they're struggling. I felt like it's this great wealth of knowledge I cannot get out of a textbook. My current job now is very different. What I'm learning now really is like, how's the world functioning? And how can we help? How can we help heal that? And it's just a process of like, after my shift's done, I'm like, wow, I learned a lot. And I always try to take that away. I always try to take every single day, what did I learn? Because I could always find something easy that didn't go well. Like very easy, like the fact that I tripped on my lawn on the way out. Like, okay, this is a day I should just go home and go to bed. But hey, you know what? The grass is great. It's manicured, there's some beautiful butterflies flying around, but it's really taking those little things day to day and making positive, because life is actually very short and it's very delicate.
Awesome. I personally have one last question
Sure.
before we wrap it up, and that is we have students at times who will watch this recording later on and they have follow-up questions.
Sure.
Is it okay if we won't send you 15 students? What we would do is probably send one list.
Yeah,
In the days and the weeks to come, if they have follow-up questions, is it okay for either Blake or myself or someone from the team to reach out and kind of shoot these questions your way?
absolutely. Please do. I'm always happy to answer questions. I'm like such a big person on knowledge and education, and like, just keep going. Just keep going.
Awesome.
You never know. When you look back, it's better to look back and say, hey, I've accomplished this versus I wish I could have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Leilani.
Oh,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. It's been a joy to hear you. And thank you, thank you, thank you to
Thank
our
you.
students out there. That's going to conclude today's EMT or session with Leilani, but we'll have another session coming up at noon with an electrician. So super excited about that. We're not done yet. We're just done with this session. Let me clarify. So have a wonderful day, and thank you again, Leilani, and see you students shortly.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.